Lamplight Universe presents Treasure Hunters, a Kingdom of Florida adventure. Chapter 5, Sacrifice.
In the morning, our spirits were lifted somewhat by the mercy of the rising sun, and we decided that we couldn't allow our crewman's life to be lost in vain. So, we continued further south to resume our search for Cesar, with the additional possibility of locating the gems, though by all accounts we now presumed at least one may have made its way to the farthest coast of the mainland. Our journey led us soon to the next island, which appeared in the distance as a great mirage, blurred and warped so that its true silhouette was ever-changing. When we came closer, however, it became clear why this occurred. The edges of the island were streaked with slow-burning flames, giving off a startling heat. The beach was covered in black sand and huge, porous, volcanic rock formations. This hellish vision frightened us so that we could scarcely breathe, sailing quietly until we reached the lukewarm shallows before us. We cautiously gathered into our rowboat and moved silently toward the smoky isle, discerning a narrow path that seemed untouched by the tongues of fire that whipped along the tide line. Upon reaching the water's edge, I dangled a strip of cloth toward the black earth as a test of its temperature. To my relief, the scrap did not catch fire. Using caution, I placed one foot to the ground, followed by the other as I realized this route was cool to the touch. Our party followed the narrow route, which moved us away from the comforting lapping of waves and into a smoky wasteland, embanked on either side by a porous and ashy cliff face. As we rounded one bend in the lifeless ravine, we trudged beside rivulets of molten hot lava, fissures through which the reddish glow could be seen amidst wisps of dark smoke. The whole scene gave me an uneasy impression, conjuring mythical memories of Hades drawn from the books on mythology I read as a child. Or, worse yet, the end of the world as described in the biblical book of Revelation. These musings were interrupted by the sound of distant wailing.
Hey! Ayúdame!
The hair on my neck stood on end. It was the sort of torment one reads about in apocalyptic literature and religious texts, and I was utterly terrified. Not because of any fear for my own safety, but because I recognized the voice. It was Cesar. It was a cry for help. I lurched forward, but Coral held me back.
I've been on enough of these strange islands to know that sounds like a trap.
She cautioned.
If Cesar survived here for months, he can make it a few extra moments.
I knew my love was right, but still my heart yearned to rescue my old friend from whatever peril now ensued. We concluded that the best course of action would be to follow these cries, with periodic stops to gather our bearings and look out for any potential threats. Soon our path led us to a dead end. A sharp rock face extended before us. Hemmed in on either side by the tall black cliffs, we realized we had little option but to turn back. Ginger, however, approached the smooth stone surface before us and began to inspect it more closely. To our delight, she discovered a slight crack, a seam running vertically from the floor toward the sky.
Why, I think it's a door,
Ginger exclaimed as she began to blow dust and debris from within the thin crack. She placed her ear to the stone.
Help!
It sounds as if Cesar's cries are coming from within.
Of course they are, I thought. Everything inside of me wanted to turn back, for I sensed there was some great power beyond the doors, some great evil. But we had come so far. We couldn't turn back when we were so near to finding our long-lost companion. I approached the great stone doors to see if there was a clear way to open them. There was no handle, nor was there a space through which a key might be inserted. Yet it was clear that this was most certainly a door of some ancient origin. While our party pondered this latest dilemma, we heard a deep, splintering crack. I turned to see a few pebbles patter down the face of the rock wall before us. Then the door's seam began to widen. The two great doors swung slowly outward, opening by no effort of our own, and a rush of steamy air issued forth.
Ayúdame! Help! Somebody!
Cesar's cries echoed again, this time more clearly coming from the chamber before us. I peered inside hesitantly. The edges of the walls glowed as if illuminated by fiery lights, or perhaps the same eternal flames that scorched the borders of the island itself. We could not turn back now. With the way opened before us, we crossed through the warm stone threshold and began to descend a set of steps that cut into the black earth. Suddenly, the doors creaked again behind us and grated back into place, locking us helplessly inside, prisoners of this underworld. I wiped the profuse sweat from my face with a sleeve and allowed my gaze to follow the steps downward. They extended for quite some distance before jutting in another direction. Down we trudged. The dark stone walls were hot to the touch, so we proceeded single file down the staircase, keeping as near to the center of each step as possible. Though I found it hard to direct my attention in any sort of meaningful way, I noticed that the walls were lined with carvings and etchings that depicted various scenes featuring 3 women, warriors or rulers of old, I presumed.
Hey! Ayúdame! Someone help! Can anyone hear me?
Caesar's wails were louder now. I sensed we were close to finding him. We rounded the next bend in the labyrinthine staircase and came upon a wrought iron gate. Through its metallic bars, I saw a sight that simultaneously made my heart leap and sink within the same moment. There was Cesar, and he was alive. To my dismay, however, he wore shackles around his wrists that bound him to a far wall. "Cesar!" I cried out to him as I ran toward the bars. I recoiled immediately as my hands nearly burned from the heat of the searing metal on the gate. Cesar saw me and began to cry. Then he nodded his head, gesturing for me to look to the other side of the large chamber in which he was held captive. Atop a curious stone throne at the far side of the chamber sat a strange figure. She appeared to be part woman and part beast, the latter being obvious from a set of filed-down stubby horns atop her head, and doe-like hooves instead of feet. That familiar flaming red glow floated around her billowing garments, but she seemed unfazed by the intense heat that pulsed through the tunnels. When she saw us, she chuckled and waved her hand, which prompted the gate to lift upwards where it disappeared from view. Jeanmarc and I ran toward our dear old friend, but I nearly tripped when I felt my feet stick into place on the floor. It consisted of the same black sand that littered the beaches of the island, and we now perceived that both of our feet were sinking ever so slightly into it. Our companions had also entered the room, albeit more hesitantly, and soon all of us were up to our ankles in sand. Thankfully, the sinking ceased at this point, and our attention turned to the fiery woman upon her throne. She smiled in a manner which suggested she possessed some clever secret, then sauntered toward us in a sort of trot.
"Are these friends of yours, Cesar?"
the woman asked. Sweat oozed down his face, but Cesar made no reply. The woman, who was nearly a head taller than I, stooped upon nearing me and Jeanmarc.
"You know this man.
She said definitively.
You have been through much to come and find him."
Through hell and back, it seems.
Jeanmarc muttered under his breath.
We will see who makes it back.
the woman hissed.
Please,
Coral begged.
let our friend go and we'll be on our way.
I tensed as the beast woman moved toward Coral. She then began to orbit my dearest betrothed, inspecting her as if she were familiar.
Have we met? Perhaps in some distant prior life?
Coral extended a quizzical look and shook her head slowly.
I think I'd remember meeting a devil like you.
I've been called a devil before,
She answered.
but my name is Satira.
After a few more moments of looking over the princess and the rest of our party, Satira moved to Cesar. He flinched as she placed a hand on his clammy cheek.
Unfortunately,
She began.
I simply cannot let my dear Cesar go.
I inquired as to the reason that her hand was stayed.
Cesar is mine, you see. He has pledged himself to be my servant in exchange for his life.
Here her gaze drifted off. Then she gestured to the ceiling behind us, from which dangled a macabre chandelier fashioned from hundreds of mismatched bones.
It had been so long since I had someone here to keep me company. And then poor Cesar found his way into my domain. I was quite grateful his ship was torn asunder. Otherwise, I'd still be here alone, biding my time in solitude.
Is it true? I asked of Cesar. Have you made a pledge to this creature? Our old companion nodded solemnly.
I was starved and half dead when she offered me food and drink.
Cesar said softly.
I had no other choice but to pledge or perish.
Caesar's head drooped as he finished.
But
Satira said, raising a pointed finger.
if one would take his place, I would willingly part with my dear Cesar. Though, of course, it would break my heart so very much.
For a few moments, our party cast wary and troubled glances to one another, unsure of the strange woman's intentions. As we were trapped and at Satira's mercy, it was clear we had few options. Then, after a brief and knowing look to Coral, I spoke up. I will take his place. The others gasped. I trembled. The beast woman smiled maliciously, flashing a set of surprisingly white denticles.
Are you sure about that?
She bent closer to inspect me. I took a deep breath and nodded. I have the least to lose, I stuttered. My companions have family or positions they must return to. But I have only myself and my love. My eyes met Coral's again, and I saw that they were now welling up. Jeanmarc lowered his head with concern, and Satira returned to Cesar.
Very well.
She said.
A life for a life is only fair.
She waved her hands. I and my companions felt ourselves lifted a few inches upward. When I looked down, I realized that I now stood atop the thick sand in which we'd been immobilized moments earlier. She was about to free Cesar from his chains when she turned back to us.
However, if I'm to free him and take you, the rest of your party must agree to never return to this place. For if you break this agreement, I will make it so a terrible curse befalls you.
Not one of us could dare respond, for we knew not what to say. But the woman continued with her act of unshackling Cesar. A few moments later, he ran freely into my arms, thanking me profusely.
Jesse! Gracias. Thank you, my friend.
The next moment, he embraced Jeanmarc, then Thatcher, before the beast woman interrupted our reunions.
Time is up.
She belted.
One man is free, and the other must take his place.
The woman stared at me with a mesmerizing, hypnotic glare, which prompted me to nod and move toward the chains. Bastion and Ginger held Coral back, for they knew that this act must be done. I held out my hands to receive the shackles. I took a deep breath and prepared to seal my fate in this place that now seemed more like hell than ever. While I watched my friends begin to back slowly toward the open gate through which we'd come, I realized that one was not with them. Jeanmarc now stood at my side.
"Take me instead,"
he said, thrusting his wrists toward the beast woman. There was no wavering in his tone. I couldn't believe it, nor could I find the words to speak.
"To my Marie, I'm already as good as dead,"
he muttered softly.
"If by some grace I'm able to earn my freedom, I will return to my family. But you, Jesse, you have your entire life ahead of you."
Jeanmarc motioned with his head toward Coral.
"A long and full life."
For a few moments I pondered my choices. Then our vile hostess became impatient.
Make up your minds quickly,
She seethed.
for I will not always be this generous.
I looked to Jeanmarc one last time. I could tell there would be no convincing him otherwise. We exchanged a heartfelt embrace. Then he reached to his neck and removed his prized possession, the locket which featured the portraits of his wife and children.
"Take it to them,"
Jeanmarc said with a half smile. I agreed. I promise to watch over them. They will be like my own kin. With our pleasantries exchanged, we now parted ways. I returned to the side of my other companions and we watched as the metal gate closed between us and Jeanmarc. With slow, sad, somber steps, we returned to the surface and boarded our ship in silence. From that moment onward, I would keep my word and my promise, and few days passed where I didn't think of the dear man and wonder as to his ultimate fate. The ensuing days were somewhat of a blur. As we were already so far south, we decided that we should make a stop at the final island in this mysterious connection of curious worlds before returning to the mainland. Perhaps, we thought, this island might yield further intelligence as to the resting place of the remaining gems of power. Though they were eager to get home to their loved ones, Thatcher and Cesar agreed that this was the best course of action. We reached this isle around midday. The sun was muffled and scattered by a sky full of cotton clouds, and the sight of this land's warm, pink sands was enough to bring momentary relief to our hearts, for they were heavy and somber in the wake of Jeanmarc's sacrifice at the hand of the beast woman. I willingly collapsed onto the soft, rosy beach and nearly fell asleep at the lull of the tide. Coral sat beside me and ran her fingers through my blonde hair, which had grown quite a bit longer since our earliest days together. I huddled close to her and held her tightly. In the safety of her embrace and the serene beach, I wept at the loss of my old friend. It's bad enough to grieve believing you're never going to see a person you love again. Worse still to have hope ignited, only to have him dead or as good as dead a second time. Our small party, now consisting only of Bastian, Ginger, Thatcher, Cesar, Coral, and me, traversed the small island. After leaving the beach, we found ourselves in a lush tropical forest. These woods were nothing like the terrifying jungles which we'd encountered on our prior journeys. Perhaps it was that we'd experienced such great loss and now feared little else, but we felt a wave of serenity as we explored this new land. As I stated earlier, I had hoped this island might beget some new knowledge of the gems of power. However, we had no such fortune. We prepared to leave the island and make the return journey to our home port near the Palace of Mangonia, gathering exotic and native fruits for food as our rations were beginning to run low. Before we piled into the rowboat to return to the Queen Lily, though, I had a premonition. My thoughts turned to the mask of memories. I recalled the terrifying scene that unfolded upon the last time I wore it. The memory of Captain Zinka, the woman with the fish charm, and the pirate captain who absconded with the Gem of Might. We must hide it, I explained, gesturing to the mask which was wrapped in a shroud. If this were to fall into the wrong hands, it would be far too dangerous, especially with those marauders searching for the ancient power of the gems, too. All agreed.
Where do you suggest we hide it?
Coral inquired. I recalled a spot that I'd seen near the island's center earlier that day. Soon, as the sky grew golden, we were waltzing across the island. We reached the clearing in little time, and I pointed to a pile of small rocks. Carefully, we removed some of these stones, placed the mask, still wrapped in thick cloth, within the space, then stacked the rocks once more. The weight and size of the stones would ensure the mask was protected from wind and animals. If we ever needed to find the mask again, I could easily retrace my steps to this spot. Finally, we made our way back to the ship. The sun sank low as we climbed aboard and began to right the ship, orienting her north. I stood by Coral's side as we gazed off the stern. What a baffling journey we'd taken in just a few short months. It seemed as if I'd known my dear princess for a lifetime. The lamp-engraved ring on her finger looked brighter, shimmering in the fading light. We decided right then that we would be married upon our return to the palace. After that, we would have many more adventures and, eventually, return to the other world, to my home, to grow our family. I spent nearly 2 years in the kingdom before we returned home. In that time, we had many adventures, and I spent much time researching the gems of power, learning of the tales and legends, many of which were told in varying versions so as to make the truth rather elusive. I became an expert in these artifacts and their trivia, however, and I hoped to one day find all of them. 2 years after we returned to the other world, our beautiful daughter was born, our dearest Vera. Such a joy to watch her grow. I also made good on my promise to Jeanmarc. Coral and I comforted Marie in her grief, and her younger son, Edison, grew up alongside our daughter, for there were only a few years separating them. As my responsibilities have shifted from swashbuckler to father, I feel it is nearing the time at which I must end the chronicle of my journeys in these pages. But I know there will still be many more stories to tell. Thus concludes our journey to the Wayward Isles.
Treasure Hunters, A Kingdom of Florida Adventure, is a production of Lamplight Universe, based on the Kingdom of Florida novels by Taylor Thomas Smythe. Treasure Hunters is written and produced by Taylor Thomas Smythe. Starring Femi Kozlowski as Coral, Jedidiah Montalvo as Jeanmarc, Mary Stucchi as Satira, Comfort Olugbuyi as Ginger, Thomas Contreras as Cesar, and Taylor Thomas Smythe as Jesse. Narrated by Nicole Johnson. For more adventures, visit kingdomofflorida.com.